All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is how to find the exact value of a trig ratio using another trig ratio. Okay, so if we're taking a look at the first example here, it says if theta is an angle in standard position with its terminal arm in quadrant 2 and cosine theta is equal to -1 over 4, determine the exact value of cotan theta. So remember, cotan theta, that ratio was equal to x over y. So what we want to find is our x and y values first. So that's all going to come from the fact that we have this ratio. Cosine theta is equal to -1 over 4. Also, they give you a clue here where this angle is. It tells you that the angle terminates in quadrant 2. So that means it ends up in quadrant 2. So here's your quadrant 1 and here's your quadrant 2. So we know that whatever this point is, it's going to be somewhere in this quadrant. So that is theta, okay? And using that terminal arm, you're going to once again create some sort of right angle triangle. And we don't want to define those sides. And how we're going to do that is use the fact that we know that cosine theta is equal to -1 over 4. Okay, so remember, what was the cosine theta ratio equal to? Well, that was equal to x over your r value. So that means my x value is going to be -1. Okay, so x is equal to -1. So whatever this distance is from here to here, that's -1. Okay, and then finally my r value, which is the hypotenuse of my triangle, is going to be equal to 4. So that's where the 4 goes. And looking at my ratio here, we want the x value, which we know is -1, but we need the y value, which is something we don't have, which is this side right here. So looking at this triangle, we know the hypotenuse. We know, if we're taking a look at the reference angle here, we know the adjacent sides. So we need to go ahead and find the y value using the Pythagorean theorem. So I'll start it off here. R squared is equal to x squared plus y squared. Okay, r squared we know is 4 squared. X squared is -1 squared plus y. Okay, so we're going to do some isolating here. So we have 16 is equal to 1 plus y squared. Okay, 15 is equal to y squared. And finally, my y value is going to be the square root of 15. And once again, we're going to leave that as a radical because we want to find exact values. Okay, so once we know our y value, I'm going to put that in my diagram here so you can see what's happening here. So y is equal to the square root of 15. So let's go ahead and define this cotan ratio. We want x over y. So my x value is going to be -1, and my y value is going to be the square root of 15. Okay, and so that's your answer. The cotan theta ratio is equal to -1 over the square root of 15. And notice that it's negative, but remember, applying your add sugar to coffee rule, so this is add sugar to coffee. The only ratio that should be positive here is your sine ratio, and it's reciprocal. So it makes sense that this cotan ratio is negative because only the sine and the cosecant should be negative in that, or so should be positive in that quadrant. So there's your answer right there. I'll circle it for you. And let's do another one. So taking a look at my next slide here, it says if theta is an angle in standard position with its terminal arm in quadrant 3, and tangent theta is equal to 5/8, determine the exact value of sine theta. Okay, so we know that sine theta is equal to y over r. Okay, so let's see, using our tangent ratio, what side lengths do we know already? Well, we know that this angle terminates somewhere in quadrant 3. So 3 is right here. So I'm going to draw, sketch. We know that's where it's going to be. Okay, so that is our angle in standard position. Using that terminal arm, we're once again going to create a right angled triangle. Okay, so let's look. What are the side lengths do we know? We know that tan theta is equal to 5/8. Okay, so our tan ratio is equal to y over x. So that means my y value is going to be 5. So this side length which is the height, is going to be 5, and my x value is going to be 8. But this question is a little bit of a tricky one because we need to be careful with the signs here. We're working with quadrant 3, so all my x values are going to be negative, and also all my y values are going to be negative. So this is actually negative 8, and this is negative 5. Okay, when we divide those, we get a positive, and that's why this tan ratio is positive 5 over 8. So when you're doing your questions, you got to make sure you know which quadrant you're working in and the signs of each of your values. Okay, so looking at the sign ratio, we know what the y value is. That y value is negative 5, but unfortunately we do not know what our r value is equal to. But it's easy to find because we're going to apply once again our Pythagorean theorem. So r squared is equal to x squared plus y squared. X squared is equal to negative 8. So negative 8 squared plus y, which is negative 5 squared. And this is going to be all equal to r squared. So we know this is 64. This is 25. Okay, so we'll keep going here. So 64 plus 25 is going to give you 89. Okay. And finally, we're going to take the square root of 89 and the square root of r squared, and we're going to get an r value of the square root of 89. So we'll leave it once again as a radical because we want our answers in exact form. So that means negative 5 is going to be under 89. Okay, so let's see if that makes sense. Well, if we apply our add sugar to coffee rule once again, we have A, S, T, and coffee, or so C. And the only ratio that should be positive in this quadrant is your tangent ratio. Your sine ratio should be negative as a result. So we get negative 5 over the square root of 89. And so that's how you find a trig ratio using another given ratio.